Today's show is brought to you by St. Ansgar State Bank. When you've served the local community for over 130 years, you tend to learn a thing or two. That's why we're proud to offer the personalized customer service you expect living in a small town, alongside modern conveniences like our online banking, mobile deposits, and STA Bank app. Stop by or visit us online at stansgarbank.com to learn more. Member FDIC.
What are we calling this?
Episode 2.
Yep.
Good question. Eric usually does the intros.
Yeah, so I've never done one of these. It's weird. I always just like contribute, jump in. All right, here we go.
Intro to music. That's all we got.
That's all we got. Here we go. 3, 2. Welcome. Season 2, Week 2, Episode 2, Behind the Saints here.
Two's all around.
Your average Joe and the Duke Scoop.
Hey, Joe, what do you know?
We are going to recap a little bit of last week, talk a little bit about the Osage game. We will set up the week to come. We'll talk about some games around the state, and we'll just pretty much get you your high school football fix here in Mitchell County over the next hour or so. No idea if it takes an hour. Let's hope not. So let's talk about last week. Saints win it 28-14 in a game that I think I said during the broadcast never felt like it was as close as it was. I mean, it was a 7-point game for the majority of that football game, but the Saints really controlled the football game, controlled the tempo, did what they needed to do. And honestly, it was one of those strange feelings of we're going to win this football game kind of throughout, right? I don't know. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I think it felt like when Osage answered that the Saints were like, oh, okay, whatever. We're just going to go march down and score 2 then. I mean, it wasn't like, I guess the way I'd put it is it felt like when the Saints got in like 3rd and long situations or they got behind in the chains, they were able to just settle down and, all right, let's keep the chains moving and make the plays when they need to make those plays.
Yeah.
And I think that, there wasn't like, oh, we got a big first down, we need to get this here. I mean, there was some moments like that, but They converted on them, like I just mentioned. Right. So they weren't ever like chasing the game. They were always felt like they were in control, even though the score was close at times.
Yeah, and I think you said that Friday night too, that a part of that may have been because we answered. When we needed to have an answer, we found that answer. And that was really fun to see. It starts with senior quarterback Jayce Schwiesow. He joined us on the JV broadcast last night. We were back in Osage doing just a kind of a limited scaled down version so we could bring some JV coverage to folks out there that couldn't be to the game. And he joined us in the fourth quarter of that game on the broadcast, and he made that comment like, no, we feel like we kind of settled in, and we've got a bunch of seniors who have been there and kind of struggled. Jayce mentioned that. We were talking last night. The JV game didn't go well score-wise. And, he made that comment that, well, we weren't very good as freshmen either. Our group wasn't. And, they were kind of reflecting on that, well, we figured it out.
Welcome to Saints TV, Jayce Schwiesow.
How's it going?
So, big win Friday night. Felt good?
Yep.
Yeah, it looked good. I thought you guys could tell what the game plan was when we came in. We executed it fairly well. We talked about, the running game. Needed to just kind of figure out what that was going to look like, right? With 3 new guys back there.
Yeah.
What did you see from the quarterback perspective?
I mean, obviously we lost a lot, but I think line-wise we're so much advanced from what we've been. Just
at this time of the year,
people know where everything's go. I mean, last year, some of it was just people didn't know where to go, and our line was kind of just back and forth or whatever. So
Dylan Hansen was there as well and kind of made some of those same comments. So that was it was fun to see those guys there, number one, and number two to just have them give us a few words, and both of them were like, no, we felt like we had what we needed to finish that game, and boy, they were sure happy. They were proud of themselves and of their teammates and as a group to complete that and win that big game from a pride perspective here in Mitchell County.
And also part of it, there's some upperclassmen, quite a number of upperclassmen on this team. I think you said there was 24
upperclassmen.
Mm-hmm. And so they've seen a lot of football games. So this isn't new to them. I mean, they've been in the heat of the battle before. But also, talking about small schools, they play a lot of other sports too. So there's
Yep.
pressure situations in those other sports that they face as well that, maybe it doesn't, the plays themselves or the skill set you need for, let's say, basketball, baseball, not all of it translate to football, but performing under pressure does.
You bet. And that confidence to do that and that ability and desire to compete. Say, hey, we got to challenge ourselves. We got to step up. This is that moment. I thought we did that really well last week. If we just look from a stat perspective, like I said, the Saints win at 28-14 over Osage. Jayce Schwiesow, senior quarterback, 121 yards on 7 completions. That's a 65% completion percentage, 7 of 11, 17 yards per catch, and a touchdown. Obviously, none bigger than the one to none other than Dylan Brum, the fastest man alive. Senior receiver has 2 catches on the night, does Dylan Brum, for 75 yards and a touchdown. That 55-yard touchdown pass was a thing of beauty. I've watched it a few times. I created a little short and put it out there on Instagram. And just, if you go watch that thing, it's a beautifully thrown ball. And Dylan, in stride, knew that, hey, I just got to keep on going, fight through this little bit of contact here, and I've got myself 6, and he sure did.
Yeah, because he wasn't wide open by any means. I mean, he had a step on a guy, and Jay saw that.
Yep.
And just threw it up right where only he could get it, and that was a great pitch and catch.
During the game Friday night, we talked a lot about the running game and establishing that with Witt and Older Michaels and Connor King gone this year, all seniors last year. So replacing those guys this year was a tall order. Corbin Michaels, Christian's little brother, stepped right up into that role. 23 carries, 104 yards. That's 4.5 yards per carry.
Train.
See, this is legit. This is real. There's no AI creating this stuff. We even have train noises in the background.
AI Joe, that's quite the concept.
I like it. Tyson Klein, 11 carries, 61 yards for him. Joe Clevenger added a touchdown in there as well. Jayce Schwiesow with a rushing touchdown. So our rushing game alive and well in week 1.
As I think we knew it would be. Next man up, it's been that way for Saints football as long as I can remember. Sometimes I talk with my dad, before the season starts, and he'll be like, oh, man, I wonder how they're going to do this year. And so far, week 1, I mean, there's obviously a long season ahead of us yet. Yep. A lot can change, but it seems like so far so good.
Yep, and we had several guys rotate into the game. Cramps were a big issue with the heat throughout the week. I asked Dylan Hansen last night on the JV broadcast, so tell me about the cramps. It was not warm. In fact, it was cold by the end of that game, but we were really struggling. So were they, both sides, with that. And he said it's just a football thing of you pressing your body for 3 hours in a constant, almost all these kids play both ways, that it's a huge toll on that body. And just doing it the first time in live reps, hitting somebody else other than a teammate is different, and it's hard on the body. And he said that's kind of just a week 1 thing they were used to. They tried to do some things to make sure they were hydrated. Wasn't enough, and obviously a few guys struggled with that. He said even the guys who weren't down were feeling it, and it was one of those things where they kind of spent the weekend and early this week just getting their legs back underneath them, but it sounded like everybody was feeling much better by last night when I talked to him. So that was fun to see. Defensively, 8.5 tackles for Corbin Michaels. We knew he would be a key force on that defense from that linebacker spot. He absolutely was, back. He played quite a bit last year, especially at the end of the season, and he stepped right back into that role. Joe Clevenger had 7 tackles. A guy we didn't talk about a lot on Friday night, but you look at the stat sheet, and look at some plays. Connor Mullenbeck had 4 tackles, 4 solo tackles. He had a good night in what was really his varsity debut. He played some last year, was injured and in and out, but really this was his first kind of full-time session playing defensively and did a really nice job there for the Saints defensively as well. Of course, the 1 interception from Dylan Brum in a key spot to help salt that one away, and the Saints win it 28-14 over Osage. Duke, you had the chance to catch up with Coach Clevenger on Saturday morning, get some of his thoughts on the game the night before. What can you tell us about what you learned from Coach on Saturday?
Well, how about we just listen to what he had to say?
Let's do it.
Congrats on the win last night. How do you feel after seeing the team for the first time? Where are they at compared to where you expected them to be?
I told our kids before the game, I guess, that in some ways we're further along than, typically we are. And By that I mean in terms of like downloading information, communication up front with our offensive line. I feel like, maybe we're a little bit ahead of where we've typically been. We've kind of made a shift coaching-wise in the last couple of years where we're maybe not as old school. The amount of time that we're spending just constantly conditioning and really those first 2 weeks breaking kids all the way down. We still work awfully hard, but we've taken some of that time and better used it, I guess, for what the game is today, and just tried to get information down to kids. From that aspect, things were pretty good last night.
Any players you want to shout out did a great job, did what you expected to?
Oh,
Any you want to throw under the bus?
I don't throw kids under the bus.
Just kidding.
I think up front, our offensive line and our tight ends, we did a better job controlling the line of scrimmage as opposed to last year. Obviously we hit some big plays. The pass from Jayce to Brum in the second quarter was good. Corbin Michaels, for a 150-pound kid, runs awfully hard. But really, just kind of a collective effort. We had some kids cramping up, so we did have some backups in there. And it was just kind of, business as usual. So we have 40 guys on the team, 8 coaches, 5 managers, 3 or 4 stat girls, whatever it is. So it's kind of a group effort. We're all pulling the same direction, and it was a lot of fun last night.
Speaking about conditioning, I know early in the season you tend to see more cramps and things as kids aren't in mid-season form yet. But do you want to say anything about injuries? I know we saw Halverson kind of go down with a stinger, but it looks like he came back later in the game.
Everybody this morning, everybody's pretty sore, but I think we're good to go.
Do you feel like you've got pretty good depth?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of having being maybe the majority of your roster, or at least more than half your roster, upperclassmen, is you got kids that have been in your program at least 3 years now. Kids who know how things work, and gives us a little better depth, really across the board.
I'm looking ahead to next week. What are your thoughts on that game?
The first time we played them in must have been 2021. We'd never played them before, and they came over here and gave us a heck of a game. It was a real shootout. So we'll see what they look like on film here today, and make sure we're schooled up on them and ready to go.
And there you have it, Joe. What do you think about what Coach said?
A couple things I wrote down I thought was super interesting. One, from just a positive perspective of sounds like we're pretty healthy. Obviously had the cramp situation. We talked about Halverson early in that one, and what looked like, unfortunately, it didn't look very good, just to be real honest with you. Seeing it live and watching the one replay we showed, was like, let's not show that again, because it didn't look very good. It looked like kind of knee got caught underneath him. They were able to get that worked out. He went into that game, not right back in, sat out a quarter plus, but then went back into that game. And obviously Coach isn't going to talk a lot about specific injury stuff, but we saw him go back into the game. He didn't mention it today. I actually saw him walking Saturday morning, just as I was coming to school to drop something else off. So my own eyes told me that he was walking without a limp and looked pretty good there. So that was the one injury we could see that looked more significant, and he appears to be okay. So I just thought that, to hear him say "good to go," I think is the quote. If we're quoting Coach directly, it looks like we're good to go other than soreness. That's a real positive after week 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I thought, he talked about the offensive line. We talked about in our keys to the game on Friday night were doing a better job than we had done the prior year up front. And to hear him kind of call that out was something I was watching throughout the night, and I thought overall we won that battle, and he seemed to agree. And with again some new kids in there, that was good to see.
They must have heard your keys to the game before the game, because they had locked in and they got her done. So
I usually have some inside information on those keys to the game. I just don't dream those things up. I'll give away some of my secrets there. That we try to do a little research here at Saints TV and ask a few questions about what are we looking at this week? What are we thinking about? So some of that stuff we'll keep a little close to the vest till game time. But it is interesting to watch it play out when you hear, well, this is going to be a big deal this week, and to kind of watch it play out was interesting. Coach mentioned it, and I'll second it. Kind of next man up. I think you said that earlier. We had that several times with some of that cramping stuff where we had some backup guys go in, and a credit to those backup guys. It didn't change the game plan. It didn't change what we were trying to do. It didn't look any different when we had to make those substitutions, and that's a key, I think, to a strong team that has at least the ability or the opportunity to go deep into a season, because there will be injuries. That will happen. This is football. This is a collision sport, to steal a phrase from Coach Clevenger. That we will face some of those, and so to have some depth that looks like we have with 24 upperclassmen, some guys who've been around the program, and as Coach talked about, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to be overly optimistic, but seeing how the key focus, or one of the key focuses going into that game, was we need to do better on the line against Osage than we did last year. Check, we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we had some people go down the cramps, we had guys come in and step in and fill in those spots. And, talking about injuries, last year towards the end of the season, we had some key guys go down, and I just don't think our team was quite the same because of those injuries at the end of last season. So, I'm kind of tying it into our third point, which I think is the one I didn't see what you wrote down. You had 3 points you said from Clev's interview, but what he said right away about getting information to the kids, talking about download information. It sounds like he's pitching some business, meeting, or you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, we're going to be agile, and we're going to,
we're think outside the box.
Think outside the box. But he said that he felt like they're farther ahead this year than maybe they typically have been in the recent past. And also, he also talked about changing the way that they prepare in the preseason for this.
Yeah.
Is that your third point?
It is. It is absolutely so.
So what did you make of that?
Yeah, no, I thought it was super interesting to hear him say that, verbalize it to us, that we changed some things. A coach who's been around 25 years in the head position, been a football coach for 27 or 8, I think he said, and played obviously before that, to 30 years in, say, well, let's make an adjustment here, and I know that happened prior to this year as well, but I do think that's a tip of the hat to a guy who says, maybe there's something we can learn here. Maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe we need to make an adjustment to dedicate more practice time to downloading information. I love the way he says that, just because that's really what it is, especially when you're talking about high school kids, right? There's a ton of information that they have to gather. They're playing multiple sports. They're obviously in the classroom before they're on the field, or they can't be on the field, so they have to absorb a ton of information about everything that's going on in their life. Not to mention they're trying to grow up at the same time and be high school kids. So to make that change, to say we're going to try to get more of the game plan, more of the cerebral part of the game into our practices, so that we're further along come week 1. I think that's a huge deal, and I think we saw it on Friday night. Should we catch some scores around the state, some key numbers that might impact your Saints here?
Yeah, I'm sure by the time y'all hear this, you might have seen some of these scores already, but we should talk about what they mean going into week 2.
Let's do it. So we're going to start with week 3's opponent, West Hancock. We will travel to West Hancock next week. They win in week 1, 22-20 over Garner Hayfield Ventura. Double overtime game.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Double overtime
it
took.
Final,
so it was a scoreless first half. That game was. Garner, traditionally not a football powerhouse, or at least not the last few years.
Yeah,
but they are a 2A school, so much bigger than West Hancock.
Similar situation to us playing Osage, because they're a bigger school. And I've seen a Garner, they hadn't won over 500. They hadn't had a season record over 500 in 4 or 5 years, I want to say.
Yep, I believe that's right.
Is West Hancock down? Is Garner up? Is it a combo of the two? So having a close call, double overtime, first week of the year as you're the defending state champion, that's kind of we got to maybe steady the ship a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. One thing I think we saw last year with them is they got better as the season went on, and I'd expect the same thing out of them this year as well. So, maybe we're lucky we play in week 3. Maybe that helps us. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yep. It's. I'm sure it was a score that got some attention around the state of just, I think many expected a 40-0 kind of number. And when it wasn't that, I think it definitely raised some eyebrows. Now, as you said, and I'll second, it probably means absolutely nothing. Those teams are 2 classes apart.
Right.
The game when we go there in 10 days will be intense and will be for all the marbles, just like it was last year at the moment. Anyway, in week 3, it'll be the biggest game in Class A. There will be no doubt about that, and both teams will be ready to go. But I think any fan of West Hancock would probably tell you a slower start than they expected.
And credit to Garner, too, for putting up a heck of a fight. And, they're just down the road from Britt as well. So I'm sure there's a little bit of rivalry like we got with Osage. So those types of games, you kind of You never know what can happen sometimes.
Yep, exactly. A couple other interesting notes. Maybe let's go here. The team we play this coming week here with North Union, they drop a game to Okoboji. Same deal. Okoboji, I believe, is 2A. Yep. Union's Class A, just like us. So, but they beat them a year ago in a really good game when North Union beat Okoboji. So they kind of got shellacked this year, 7-41, 41-7, I believe, was that final. We'll talk more about it when we do pregame stuff for this week. But I think, again, they kind of got caught off guard by that one. So that'll be interesting to see what that does with Okoboji handling North Union there. Wapsie Valley came in highly touted, highly ranked. They lost to a 2A Jessup team. Are you seeing a pattern here yet? So, Jessup, Wapsie Valley aren't very far apart. I don't know if there's a rivalry there per se or not, but a 2A school versus an A school. Jessup is supposed to be loaded and supposed to be good. They take care of business, beat Wapsie Valley 20-13. Wapsie was rated in a lot of those rankings that we talked about. Lake Mills beats AGWSR. They shut them out 20-0. Again, that's a team in our district, something we will watch as we go. Madrid, they drop one to Woodward Granger. So they heartbreakers, my understanding, 29-28. Madrid loses. Another overtime game, wasn't it? I believe that was an overtime game as well. So, that, again, Madrid ranked all year last year, came in this year with a lot of expectations. They dropped, week one. Is that a wake-up call? Does it change anything for them? We'll find out. We'll keep an eye on them. MMCRU played Cherokee Washington. Cherokee Washington would be a much bigger school. I'm sure they might be a 3A school. I was going to look. I never got it done. But they got blown out by Cherokee Washington. We mentioned that one because MMCRU was ranked late last year. They were coming into week one, highly touted in Class A. Step up in class big time and kind of get worked by Cherokee Washington.
Is there a limit on how bigger of a school you can play?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Could little old St. Ansgar scheduled West Des Moines Valley or something?
That's a great.
I know if that would help.
I know what happens in baseball, and in volleyball and things like that, but I don't know about in football.
That probably wouldn't be a good idea,
right?
Right. A lot of those kids down at those schools are on the short list to go to Iowa State, or play.
With it being a collision sport, it feels like there might be a bigger difference there when they have several hundred kids to go find the biggest, strongest kids from, and we have 50.
Right.
There may be an injury concern there that arises out of some of those matchups. The last one I'll point out, scores around the state. In our district, again, West Fork gets their first win of the season. They win at 32-6 over Clayton Ridge. So I call that one out just because we play them here in a few weeks. That one will be that's a team I think somebody to keep an eye on. They have a lot to replace as they try to kind of rebuild that program. So West Fork gets win number 1 over Clayton Ridge, 32-6. Those are your scores around the state. So after looking at that, the top 10, we did your Not Your Average Joe's Completely Average and Totally Too Early rankings last week.
Is that what it was?
Something along those lines. Your graphic was better than my words, but those top 10, most of them are out, and we're out again this week. Obviously, just everything got turned upside down with as many of those kind of ranked teams. And how much do you penalize a team that lost to a team 2 classes above them? Because they still may be a really good Class A team. They just played a ranked 2A team. So does that change their rankings? So a lot of things for those the rankers to pay attention to. Of course, all I do is take the 6 polls that I can find online and average them together. Looks like this. For week number 2, the Not Your Average Joe's Completely Average poll has Wapsie Valley staying in the top 10 at number 10. Mount Ayr comes into the top 10 at number 9. Lisbon also enters the top 10 at number 8. Starmont 7. Logan Magnolia at 6. Madrid falls to 5 in the average ranking. St. Ansgar, your Saints, are up to number 4, and Not Your Average Joe's Completely Average poll. West Hancock falls to number 3, so that tight game with Garner cost them a couple of spots, at least in public perception. Yep, they went from 1 to 3, so West Hancock there comes in at 3rd. ACGC comes in at number 2, and Woodbury Central takes over the number 1 spot here in Class A. and our Not Your Average Joe's Completely Average poll. So we'll keep an eye on that throughout the season. It's kind of fun to watch that play out. Really, over the next 3 weeks or so, those teams will sort themselves out. And about that time, not coincidentally, the official poll, the actual poll that the state uses to determine playoff seedings and playoff pairings of who's going to play who, that poll comes out in 3 weeks as well. So we will bring that to you when we have it. Obviously, there's a reason they wait, because they need to sort some of this information out. What does week 1 mean in some of these close games or losses or wins? Quite frankly, we've seen that before, where big wins that look super impressive week 1, by week 4, it's like, well, okay, the team that they beat that we thought was going to be good just isn't very good. That happens. It's high school sport, so you never know what you're going to get. So we will. There's a reason for that delay, and there's a reason this one's called the completely too early preseason poll. But we do have 1 week's information underneath our belt, and that puts Woodbury Central number 1, ACGC 2, West Hancock 3, St. Ansgar 4.
Top 4.
There you go.
Mount Rushmore, that had 4.
Yep, and I think if you ask the coaches down there, they would all tell you, boy, could we just make that like number 11 somehow? Let's just drop out of that for now, right? But a good start for the Saints, and obviously that pays off when you start strong against a bigger school opponent and come out and win by a couple of touchdowns. You're going to enter some of those polls we weren't in. We talked about that. I think the Saints were in 4 of the 6 polls I could find. They're in all of them this week.
Sweet.
Should we move on to this week? Coming up in our game versus North Union?
Yeah. You heard a coach mention in his interview, they came here 2021, I think he said, gave us a shootout. So what do you think about this game coming up, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You look at the stats from last week in a game that didn't go their way. Obviously, it wasn't the start they were looking for. They lose 41-7 at Okoboji. Senior Grady Madden, number 12. You're going to hear that number and that name a bunch on Friday night. He threw for 1,100 yards last year. Comes in as their senior quarterback. Has just 5 completions on the night last Friday night for 76 yards. So 15-yard average, a nice average, but threw it 14 times, only completed 5 of those. And obviously we didn't study the film to understand where that comes from, or those drops, or those, what's going on. Is Okoboji's defense that good? We're going to find out, because he can sling it. We know he can. We know he throws it really well. So they will come in here on Friday night and try to give us that challenge. He runs it pretty well also. He had 50 yards on the ground with just scramble offense. Is that number 12, Grady Madden. The other guy to watch, they had to replace their big running back. They had a 1,300-yard back last year graduate. So they looks like number 28, Draven Keeler, is your guy that's going to step into that role. Junior, number 28, ran for exactly 100 yards on 17 carries on Friday night. So that's a 6-yard average, or nearly 6-yard average. So, that's the positive. If you look at what they did well in a game, they only scored 1 touchdown. They had 129 yards rushing. So they moved the ball pretty well on the ground. There's more to that stat, and obviously that's what those coaches are doing. Coach Clevenger talked about, I think that's what they spend, or he specifically spends the rest of Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon looking at how do we match up? What do we need to stop? What are going to be some of those keys to the game? They also had a sophomore receiver, Cole Grove, number 6, had 74 yards on 3 catches. So 3 25-yard receptions. That's pretty good. So if you do that math, well, wait a minute, didn't you say the quarterback only had 5 completions? Yeah, and 3 of them, and all but 2 yards, were to the same receiver. So we will keep an eye on number 6, Cole Grove, the sophomore receiver, coming in here for North Union on Friday night.
It only takes 1, though.
That is
score a touchdown.
That is right, and we saw that one on Friday night, and they're going to try to do that to us as they come in here on Friday night. So what do the Saints need to do from a keys to the game perspective? I think for me, and Coach talked about it, it's build on what we did last week. That's the key. Key number 1 is build on what we saw in the running game, build on what we saw at the line of scrimmage, where we controlled that game from a line of scrimmage perspective, and just prove it, maybe is the right word. Do it again. So I think that's key number 1 as we look at North Union coming into our place on Friday night. Number 2 is going to be limit number 12, Grady Madden. He's dangerous through the air. He's got a good arm. He's dangerous on the ground, as evidenced by his 50 yards of rushing last week. So he's going to be the guy to stop offensively, it will be find a way to stop him. They have a 6'7", 350-pound kid on their roster. We talked to the guys last night during the JV game about that. That's a big dude. So it'll be interesting to see how the Saints match up and how they work against a guy with just that much physical size out there on the lines. Does that change that line of scrimmage battle at all?
Stay away from that guy.
That might
or
be
hit
the
him
key.
harder.
Exactly.
Whatever. Double him up.
Key number 3, win the turnover battle. And this is probably a key every single week. But that's how, in a game that if we're, coaches aren't going to want to hear me say this, but a game we're supposed to win, right? On paper, it looks like, okay, yeah, St. Ansgar's ranked, North, and just beat a 2A team and looked really good in week 1. North Union didn't look so great, against the 2A team. The expectations for these two teams unfairly are not the same, right? Yeah. And that's a trap that you can't let your team fall into, and Coach Clevenger and his crew won't allow that to happen. But it's one of the dangers, and one of the ways that those games go the wrong way on you is when you turn the ball over, right? When you give them opportunities to either take the ball away and turn that into points the other way, give them a short field, those kinds of things. So key number 3 will be to win that turnover battle. If the Saints can do that, as well as limit Madden and kind of prove what we saw last week, I feel good about how the Saints will play this thing out on Friday night.
Do you think turnovers is going to be in your top 3 every week, Joe?
Well,
I mean, it probably deserves to be.
It deserves to be.
Extent, but
yep, there will be weeks where we leave it out just because we have something more pressing. But if you ask coaches, I'm sure they'd tell you it's a top 3 thing every single week that we have to hang on to the football. And then it's how you go out and win close games or tight games is you get that one turnover that you turn into points, and now it's a 7-point W. And hey, look at that! That turnover is the difference in the game. So it's one of those things that you've got to do well in every game, but it's going to become more and more important as you get down the road. Coach Clevenger talked about it in our pregame show of being the best version of ourselves, being as mentally and physically ready to be at our peak as we can as we roll into the playoff season. And that's a part of that those coaches preach.
Well, I think his specific wording is, we're not great yet, but we have a chance to be.
Yep, I love that line. We're not there yet. We're not great, but we could be. We could be if we keep working at it. And I think that's what we saw, and that's where I love this team. And what we saw on Friday night is we have that potential. It looks like to kind of roll off of last year's 10-win season, graduate a bunch of guys who had huge impacts on that team and on those 10 wins, and just do it again. Just reload, like you talked about earlier. It's hard to replace those guys, but we're going to find a way because we have a bunch of guys who are committed to this program and been here a long time, know the game, and are going to go out and be physical and go play like a Saint, and that's fun to see.
So earlier I mentioned Mount Rushmore for some reason, and I guess this is stuck in my head.
Yep.
What is I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Oh boy.
What's your Mount Rushmore of St. Ansgar running backs all time?
Oh boy. I'm going to make some old school people probably upset because of course, it's recency bias, right? All of the ones I can think of are the guys that were.
So this is a little unfair, just disclaimer, because we don't have the whole record book in front of us.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who that we've had so many that have been so much fun to watch. Probably, Shika is the first guy that comes to my mind. Of just a physical,
quintessential.
Oh,
he's poster boy St. Ansgar football, I think.
Absolutely, and just run right at you. And if you want to choose to be in his way, that's fine.
And then
but
a guy,
I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, a guy a year or two younger than him, Jared Milonic, was the same way.
Milonic, yep. Absolutely. Next for me is, and maybe it's more kick return than it was running back. In fact, it probably is Hansen.
Oh, Kyle.
Kyle Hansen.
Oh, he was a solid running back.
He was a solid running back as well. But what sticks out in my mind is the kick return in the championship game.
Yeah,
exactly. I
First
see him.
One in state history, I think. Was it?
I can't remember. I remember it was a special.
First one to open the second half or something. Yeah. There was something. unique about it. But
and then also on that team, watching, I believe that would have been John Sievert, right?
Yep.
On that team in the playoff game at the fullback spot.
Tony Heimer was a beast on that team as well.
Yep, there were so many guys, but I remember watching. I should go back and look at the film. I'm sure it's not true, but it feels like in one of those playoff games leading up to that, we handed the ball to John Sievert like 15 times in a row, and he got 4 yards 15 times in a row, and we just marched down the field. And it was, hey, we'll do something else as soon as you stop this. But since you can't, we're just gonna keep doing it, and we did over and over and over and over again. So, those are some guys that come to my mind right off the top. Of course, John's little brother Jack was great a few years ago. Ryan Cole came out of nowhere a few years ago and had a junior season. It was like, well, wait a minute, maybe that was even a sophomore season of,
all-time leading rusher.
Now. Had 80-yard run after 80-yard run that season. It seems like
he's having a great career now over at Morningside.
Yep. I know you asked for a top 3, and I fit top 6
4
or 7, I think, in there. But and those are just the ones in kind of recent memory, last 20 years I could think of. But I'm sure we missed some, but a lot of storied, great running backs here in our program.
I asked you the question. Now I'm putting myself on the spot trying to remember some of those names from before, I guess, our time, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
But wasn't Joel Nickerson a great running back?
I believe he was.
Yeah, he's in the record book for a number of things.
We'll have to have some viewers chime in the chat here, either on this, give us some feedback. Tell us who your top 3 or 4 Saints running backs of all time. Who do we miss?
We should do like a poll or a survey.
That's a good way to do it.
Just have like the people choose.
Pull the top maybe 20 running backs out of the stat book and then say, all right, because stats aren't everything.
No, they're not.
Tell us who the best was in your opinion via poll. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Anyway, we didn't narrow it down to a top 4, but we got a plan.
We got a plan.
So, any last thoughts before we see everybody on this Friday?
So it's going to be fun here Friday night. Obviously, at home, we need as many folks in the seats as we can get. So we'd love to see you here. Be loud. I believe it's construction night, so the student section ought to be dressed up and raucous. I don't know what construction night means. We're going to find out. I think we'll probably have some bright high-vis green and some other things going on there in the student section. But it's the weather's supposed to be beautiful. It should be another great Friday night of football here in North Iowa. Don't miss it. Be here. Thank you for joining us. Episode 2 of Behind the Saints as we preview North Union coming up.
And the anticipation for that game is building. See what I did there. Construction night.
I see what you did there. I love it.
All right, folks. That's probably enough from us. We'll see you next time.
See ya.